Hello, my name is Mark, and today I'm going to be going over simplifying polynomial expressions. Let's go! This is the bathroom. Look at this, look at this. You could finish a whole math problem before having to pee. This is for the Algebra and Functions IBEW Aptitude Test, the math portion. Before I start this video, make sure that you like it, and then you subscribe to the channel for more free content. And check out all the playlists that I have curated for you. Each playlist will be specific to your needs. I'm going to be tailoring it a little bit more as I go and as I collect more data from you. So, how I'm going to work out this presentation is I'm going to be going over these problems, these questions, and then, yeah, I'm just going to be writing them out with you, and then we're going to go over just a few tips on how to get the correct answer, how to choose the correct answer. And then at the very end of the presentation, I'm going to have all the answers along with steps for you to screenshot later. Or you could skip to the part of the video where I do have these questions with the answers and step-by-step directions on how to do them. So what I do recommend, though, is to just follow along with your boy and
just soak it all in.
Soak up all the knowledge. All right, let's begin. Question number 1. Simplify the following expression. We have this expression here. We have 2k plus 4m minus 5 plus 7k minus 2m. And let me just go ahead and get my marker here. And the first thing that I am going to do is I'm going to pay attention to the parentheses over here, this part of the problem. Okay, I'm going to pay attention to that part. Why? Because in PEMDAS, this is where I'm supposed to be looking at, right? P stands for parentheses in PEMDAS. And I look inside these in the parentheses, and I see that there's no terms of which I could combine. And that's a good thing. It's less work for us, right? So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at what's going on outside of the parenthesis. And I see that there's a 3 here. And this is what's called a coefficient. So what I'm going to do with this coefficient, since it's like right next to the parentheses, you know, I'm going to be pronouncing parentheses in multiple ways. Parentheses. Okay, I'm going to be multiplying this coefficient into the parentheses. Okay, and it's going to look something like this. It's going to look like 3 times 2k, 3 times 4m, and 3 times negative 5. Let's remember to pay attention to these negatives, okay? One could say 3 times 5 and then get 15, but then they might not know what to do with the negative. So just remember to pay attention to the signs. It's going to be very important when we advance. Okay, so I have here, I'm going to go do the math to the right. So 3 times 2k, that equals 6k, right? And then we get 3 times 4m, and that equals 12m. And then 3 times negative 5, that's minus 15 or negative 15. And then we carry over the rest of the expression. So we get plus 7k minus 2m. Okay, this is what I like to do. What I like to do is I try to just group the terms, right? So I have 6k and I have 7k over here. So I'm just going to write down exactly that. 6k, and it's a plus 7k, right? And what does that equal? Well, that equals 13k. And then I just like to cross it out on my paper or in my notebook. And then I go to the next term. And the next term, of which I could combine like terms, is 12m and negative 2m. So I'm going to write it as such. 12m minus 2m, that equals 10m. And I'm going to cross that out. And do you see here? We have 13k and we have 10m. The tip here is we could eliminate this right here because this has 6k. The rest have 13k, 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 and we have a 13k right here. The next I would look at is the 10m over here. Well, we have 13k, yes, good, but A also has 12m, and that's not 10m. And then we have 10m for B and D. This would eliminate A. So our last term is minus 15, right? So nothing could happen to this minus 15. Nothing can be combined. So I would minus 15 like this, and there you go. And I'm going to write this in standard form. In standard form, all that means is just writing with the highest exponent. And we have k and m with no exponent. So it doesn't matter really how you write it, but then I would write with the largest term right here versus like the 10m over here. If we had like 13k squared and then 10k, this would be the correct way to write it. Okay. Standard form, all that means is the highest exponent in the front. Okay. But we don't have that. And we will look at that in the next problems. So I'm going to write it in standard form, which is 13k plus 10m minus 15. And that's our answer. And that would be B, being our correct answer, because the last term on D is negative 5 or minus 5. And we could cross that out. And that leaves us with B, and that's the correct answer.
Any questions?
No? Let's move on. Okay. Simplify the following expression. Question number 2. Now this gets a little bit more difficult. Okay. We do have another exponent, or we have another term, a higher exponent term, a squared, and we also have this negative here that we got to pay attention to. Okay. So let's go ahead and simplify it. So just like our last problem, all we're going to do is we're going to multiply this coefficient inside the parentheses. And actually, let's just ask ourselves the question all the time, what's happening in this parentheses? And there's nothing. There's nothing we could do. There's no terms that we could combine, right? So let's just go ahead and multiply, right? Multiply this for the coefficient inside the parentheses so we can get rid of it. So what is 4 times 3a squared? That is 12a squared. What is 4 times negative 2b? That is negative 8b. And then what is 4 times 5? Positive 5, and that's 20. And let's carry everything else over. And I'm going to do it like this, plus 6a squared. I wish I did it all in one, but I'm going to rewrite some of it, or just write it on another line. And then we get 12a squared minus 8b plus 20 plus 6a squared minus 9b plus 7. Now, let's combine like terms. And what terms can be combined? Or what terms should I be looking at first? And that is, what is the highest power? And I have a squared. That looks like a 9. So I'm just going to erase that really quick. Okay, I have a squared. or just I have the power of 2. And I'm going to write 12a squared plus 6a squared. And those are the only terms that could be combined with each other at the moment. And then I get 18a squared. Boom. I'm going to cross it out. And then let's look at our answer choices, right? And we have this 12a squared over here. So I am going to eliminate this because we don't need that, okay? We have an 18a squared. So we have a 75% chance of picking the right answer. Let's say if we were guessing and we were stuck on this problem. But the thing is, you will not be stuck because you are studying with me. And when you're studying with me, you will pass your test. No matter how many times it will take, you will pass your test with me. Yeehaw. Okay. Let's go ahead and go on to the next term. And we have negative 8b. So I'm going to write that down. Negative 8b minus 9b. Okay. What does that equal? What's a negative minus, or a negative and a negative minus each other, right? That would equal negative 17b. All right. Now, before moving forward, just let's look at these. And this one has 11b. Yeah, let's get rid of that. We don't need that because it's not negative 17b. And then just going on further to the next term, which is 27, or 20 plus 7. 20 plus 7 equals 27. Let's write it in standard form. 18a squared minus 17b plus 27. And that's our correct answer. And that is answer choice A. Okay, this has plus 12. Get rid of that. All right. We are tracking. Are we tracking? We better be tracking. All right, let's go. Question 3. Again, simplify the following expression. And then we have negative 3. Okay, this time we have a negative coefficient. So we got to watch out for this negative. Okay, we have a negative coefficient. And then we have to multiply it inside the parentheses again. So just like the last two questions. So I have, what is negative 3? And this time I'm going to write it all out for you guys, okay? This is the thought process that is going on in my head. Negative 3 times 2p, that equals negative 6p, okay? Negative 3 times negative 5q equals, and remember, a negative times a negative equals a positive number. So that will give us 15, positive 15q. Okay? And then now we have negative 3 times 4r, and that gives us a negative 12r, because a negative times a positive equals a negative. Okay? So now we have negative 6p plus 15q, plus 15q minus 12r, and I'm going to bring the rest of the equation down. And I have plus 7p minus 2q plus 6, plus 6r. One day I will invest into those pads where I could write. It might be worse though. Who knows? So if you notice in this problem, there is no power that is above 1. They're all just the power of 1. And what I mean by power of 1, right? I have negative 6p. And when you have a power of 1, a p of a power 1, that's all that means. It's an exponent of 1. When I say negative 6p squared, that's a power of 2. And then I have negative 6p cubed, that's a power of 3. Okay, and this one is the highest power out of all these. The higher the number, the higher the power. And we won't go with, or I will not be going over negative exponents. I don't think we'll ever see that in the test. So I have negative 6p. That can be combined with 7p. Is there another term with a p? No. So I'm going to write that down. Negative 6p plus 7p. That equals just p. Or, for the sake of the video, it's 1p, but then that equals just p. Okay? And next I'm going to just get rid of these. And then now I have 15q, and that can be combined with this negative 2q, okay? And that's going to give us 13q. And then I'm going to get rid of those, and this time I'm not going to check the answer choices. I'm just going to simplify the expression before I look. And then I go negative 12r plus 6r, and that will give me a negative 6r, giving us p, right? P plus 13q minus 6r. I think you would write it like this, though. 13q minus 6r plus p. That's a plus. But the answer choices, I have it in terms of p and then q and then r. But I guess sometimes it just doesn't matter. Who knows? I may be wrong here. But the answer is C. Oh no, the answer is A. The answer is A. That is P plus 13Q minus 6R. Answer choice A. Okay. Any questions? If there are any questions, just leave them in the comments below or email me. All right. Question number 4. All right, here we go. It's getting a tad bit difficult. Just a tad. A little bit. Just a little bit. Okay. This time we have 2 parentheses, and this time we have more coefficients, another coefficient to multiply in the parentheses, and that leaves room for mistakes, right? And we also have the power of 4. So this time, the last few questions, we only went up to 2. Now we're going up to 4. All right. So let's just go ahead and do what we learned. And what we learned is, let's go look inside the parentheses. Is there any terms we could combine? No, we cannot. Now what's next? We distribute the coefficient. And this coefficient will be distributed, this 3 will be distributed into this parentheses. This -2, okay, this -2 will be distributed to this parentheses, and these just get carried over, okay? Let's go ahead and perform that. Let's just do the first parentheses, and I'm going to just go ahead and do the math to the right, and I have 3 times 2x to the 4th, so I'm going to go 6x to the 4th, and then I have 3 times negative x cubed, and that equals negative 3x cubed. And then I have 3 times 4y, and that's positive 12y. And then I have 3 times negative 5, which is minus 15. All right, that's our first part. Okay, now I have the second parentheses, and I'm going to just do the math in orange. Okay, what is negative 2x to the 4th? Negative 2 times x to the 4th. That equals negative 2x to the 4th. Okay, and then I have negative 2 times 3x to the 3rd, and that is negative 6x cubed. And then I have negative 2 times negative y. And remember,
A negative times a negative equals a positive.
so I have positive 2y. And then what is negative 2 times positive 6? Well, that equals negative 12. Okay, we got that out the way. And then we carry over the rest of the equation. And I'm just going to rewrite that in blue. So, all right, we got everything. Now, let's go ahead and look at our terms with the power of 4. And I have 1 right here. So I'm going to go 6x to the 4th. And I'm going to combine that with negative 2x to the 4th. And there's nothing else I can combine that with. So I'm just going to cross these out. And then I'm going to get 4x to the 4th. Now let's look at our answer choices. We could get rid of b. And now let's go ahead and go on to the next one, which is this cubed, okay? This exponent that is cubed. So I'm going to write negative 3x to the 3rd, combine that with negative 6x to the 3rd, and then combine this with positive 5x to the 3rd. What does that equal? Well, what is negative 3x to the 3rd minus 6x to the 3rd? That equals negative 9x to the 3rd. Now, negative 9x to the 3rd plus 5x to the 3rd equals 4x to the 3rd, and that's a negative 4x to the 3rd. And let's look at our answer choices again. And well, this has a plus 2x to the 3rd, and the rest have negative 4x to the 3rd. So, A is incorrect. So that gives us these two answer choices. Now let's go ahead and continue on further. And the next term is this y here. So I'm going to go 12y plus 2y and then minus 7y. And then what does that equal? That's 12y plus 2y, and that equals 14y. Minus 7y, that equals positive 7y. Let's go ahead and look at our answer choices. And lookity hookity. This has 21y, that's C, and that's incorrect because we got a 7y, and that's D. So if I were taking this test, I would just circle D and go. You know, because you won't have much time when you're taking the test. So let's just go ahead and confirm that with our last term. And our last term is a negative 15 minus 12, and that equals negative 27. And there it is, 4x to the 4th minus 4x to the 3rd plus 7y, and then minus 27. There is our final simplified expression. Perfect. All right. Question number 5. All right. So I added this because this is a perfect bridge for you guys on the next video I do plan to make. So I want you to factor the following polynomial by pulling out the greatest common factor. Okay, what could be divided out of each of these terms and give us clean numbers? And when I mean clean numbers, I mean like whole numbers. Okay? Did we go over for question number 4? Did I? Yes, I did. I circled D. Okay. So the greatest common factor, and how I like to write these to teach, this is how I like to do it. Okay? So there are 3 terms. There's the 6, which is a term, the m squared, which is a term, and the n, which is a term. And that goes for every part of this expression. Okay? So I like to just group them, right? So this is the first term, second term, third term. Again, first term, second term, third term. First term, second term, third term. So I'm going to rewrite it. Okay? We have to pull out from each of these terms. And I'm going to pull out a number or a term with 3, or I don't know, a term with 3 terms? Is that how I would say it? I don't know, but I'm going to be pulling out something with 3 terms. And then I'm just going to go ahead and write it smaller. So like this. And then I'm going to rewrite this because we're pulling out from each of these terms. And that's a plus. And then I'm going to do a line here again. That's a minus. And then there are my lines. So for the first term, the greatest common factor that could be pulled out from the 6, the 12, and the 18. Well, what could be divided out is a 6. So 6 divided by 6, right? And I'm going to put the 6 here first on the outside because we're taking it out. 6 divided by 6 is 1. So I'm just going to put a 1 right here. Okay. 12 divided by 6 is 2. So I will put a 2 right here. And then 18 divided by 6 is 3. So I will put a 3 right here. Okay, we are done with the numbers. Now let's go with the m's. And the m's, the greatest common factor is just m. So I'm going to divide everything by m. And I will put the m on the outside. So m divided by m, or I'm going to start from over here. Oh no, I will start here because m divided by m is just 1. Okay? And then m divided by m again is just 1. And then m squared divided by m squared divided by m is m. All right? Okay. I will go over how I got that. All right. This is how I got that. So m squared divided by m, when you divide exponents, you minus the top numbers. Okay. So this is what's happening. You have an m. Well, m by itself actually equals m to the first power. And when you divide exponents like this, it looks like this. M squared minus the 1 at the top, and that equals m. What is 2 minus 1 is m to the first power, equaling just m. Now, how did I get this 1 right here? Well, we have m divided by m, but what we're hiding is that the 1 at the top, and then we get m 1 minus 1, which gives us m to the 0 power, which gives us 1. And that's why I put a 1 here for m divided by m. So now let's go ahead and go in terms of n. And the greatest common factor is just an n. So I'm going to put this n over here, and then n divided by n is just 1. And then n squared divided by n is just n. And n divided by n again is 1. Now let's just simplify this, because all this means in parentheses is 1 times m times 1, which gives us m, and 2 times 1 times n gives us 2n, and then 3 times 1 times 1 gives us just 3. So our simplified polynomial expression now is 6mn, because we took this out, and then multiplied by m plus 2n minus 3. And that is answer choice C, right? Now, I have this, right? Now I'm going to do it in reverse.
Oh, brother,
okay,
this guy stinks!
For you guys. Okay, so remember what we did in questions 1 through 4. We distributed, right? So let's just treat 6mn as just one big term, okay? 6mn we could multiply to m, and then 6mn we could multiply to 2n, and 6mn we could also multiply by that negative 3. Do you see what's going on here? Let me just erase the top. Okay, so 6mn, well, that equals 6m squared n, okay? Remember? Remember when we multiply in? We multiply only the like terms. So that's why we get a squared m. And then we go 6mn times 2n. Well, the like terms here, right? The like terms here are 6 and 2, which equals 12. And then you have m. I'm just going to carry over that m because nothing can be multiplied by it. And then n times n equals n squared. Okay, when you multiply, now you multiply exponents, instead of subtracting, you add them together. Okay, this is what n times n really means. Okay, it really means this: n to the first power times n to the first power, which equals n1 plus 1, and this equals n squared because 1 plus 1 is 2. That's what's happening. Okay, let's continue. What can this negative 3 be multiplied by? Well, it could be multiplied by the 6. So minus, right, because 6 times a negative number, which is negative 3, equals 18. Then carry over the m and n. Those can't be multiplied by anything. And then we get our expression again, our beginning expression. The answer, though, here is this right here, because we pulled out this 6mn, which is the greatest common factor. Okay. Now that you know that, you will be ready for the upcoming video where I will be going over GCF in detail. However, this is kind of all you need to know about GCF. I included this in here too because technically we are simplifying a polynomial expression. We are just using different techniques. Okay, question 6. These ones are going to be monsters. This one includes fractions. Watching the negatives, you got to track the negatives, and it has multiple parentheses and coefficients, like this one right here, right? What do we do here? So here we go. Yeah, one thing I do want to know is this may seem simple, and yes, it is simple. However, you will make mistakes if you do not practice. So you must practice. The more reps you get in, the more familiar you'll get when unknown problems come at you. And what I mean is the problems on the test, okay? Because the problems that we will go over will be very similar, but they won't be exact. They won't have the exact numbers. So you need to understand the fundamentals. All right, here we go. Let's go ahead and just start with the first parentheses over here. So I have negative 1/2, and then we're going to multiply that to these terms right here. And when you multiply by a fraction, right, it's going to look like this. Let's just use the first term here. Negative 1/2 times 8x squared. And what this actually means is negative 1/2 times 8x squared over 1. And then we just multiply across, like we know how to multiply fractions, right? And this equals 8x squared divided by 2, because 2 times 1 equals 2. And what is 8 divided by 2? That's 4. So we have negative 4x squared as our first term here. Okay, now you know that. Let's just go ahead and work out this fraction, because the next question, which is question 7, we have multiple fractions, and I need you to get this skill down to multiply fractions. Okay, multiply and divide. So let's go ahead and go with the next term, which is negative 1/2, and I'm going to multiply that with negative 6y. Do you see what I did here? A negative times a negative equals a positive. So I'm just going to get rid of that negative already and write 1/2 times 6y. Oh, oops. 6y. I didn't make a mistake. Over 1 equals 6y over 2, and that equals 3y squared.
I'm kind of retarded.
I'm going to show you how I look at it or how I visualize it in my brain. So I have negative 1/2 times 10z. Well, you could just multiply this at the top. You don't need to put the 1 like I'm showing you. And then you get negative 10z, negative 10z over 2, and that just equals negative 5z. Okay, so I have 4x squared plus 3y squared minus 5z, and I'm just going to write that here on the side because we have multiple parentheses to deal with. Okay, plus 3y squared minus 5z. Okay, now let's work on this one over here. So 3 times 2x squared. Let's just go over that quickly. And let's see if I could just do it right here. 6x x squared and 3 times 4y, and that equals, wait a minute, there's no squared here. Hold on, negative 1/2, negative 1/2 times negative 6y, that equals just 3y. I got ahead of myself there. So yeah, see, there's lots of room to make mistakes. So I even make mistakes. And I'm just going to write this closer and put minus 5z. Okay, so I have this 3 times 2x squared, that equals 6x squared. 3 times 4y, that equals plus 12y. And then 3 times negative z, well, that equals negative 3z. Okay, the next one, and this one's tricky because there's no coefficient there, but actually there is. How it's written or how I visualize it is it's negative, and I like to put a 1. I like to put a 1 there. And then let's just rewrite this out so you know what I'm doing. Okay, so this negative 1, or just the negative, however you want to visualize it in your head, just gets distributed among these terms. So negative 1 times 5x squared, well, that equals negative 5x squared. And then negative 1 times negative 7y, and that equals 7y, positive 7y. And negative 1 times 2z, that equals negative 2z. Okay, we almost have our terms. And I have 4x squared minus 3y. So I have 4x squared and then minus 3y. Minus 3y. And I did notice I made another mistake here. Look, negative 1/2, right, times 8x squared. Where's my mistake? I didn't bring the negative, okay? I didn't bring the negative. This is actually negative 4x squared plus 3y minus 5z, okay? 6x squared plus 12y minus 3z, negative 5x squared plus 7y minus 2z. And if you want to get a tip here, if you just have this negative here, you just flip the sign in the parentheses for all terms. So this negative here just changes this positive 5x squared to a negative 5x squared. And then this one to a positive 7y. And this one to a negative 2z. It just flipped the sign. That's all it did. So let's go ahead and combine like terms. Combining like terms, we get negative 4x squared, negative 4x squared, plus 6x squared minus 5x squared, and then plus 4x squared. Well, combining like terms, I could see that this negative 4x squared and this positive 4x squared can be canceled out. So I'm going to cross these out, leaving me with 6x squared minus 5x squared, and this equals x squared. Okay, we have our first term. And if we look at our answer choices here, there's only 3 with x squared first, and I'm going to eliminate c. Now I'm going to rewrite the y's. Okay, so I have 3y plus 12y plus 7y, and I have minus 3y. Again, I see that these right here, this negative 3y and this positive 3y can be canceled out, leaving me with 12y plus 7y, and that is 19y. We look at our answer choices here, and there's only two, B and D, with 19y, so I can get rid of A. Now, the last term is minus 5z minus 3z minus 2z. That brings us more down to the negatives, and that equals, well, negative 5z minus 3z, that equals negative 8z. Minus 2z, well, that equals now negative 10z. And that gives me x squared plus 19y minus 10z, and that is answer choice B and D. Wow, did I do that? I did that again. Oh, no, nope. Pay attention to the signs, guys. Pay attention to the signs. Okay? So our answer choice is, or the correct answer choice is B. Right? X squared plus 19y minus 10z. All right. Perfect. We are tracking and we are going along. Okay, this is the last question, question number 7. Now this may be on the test, okay? I've gotten much feedback that the expression questions are difficult and a lot of them come with fractions. So I've made one where we are going to have an ugly fraction in the problem when we work it out. And then when we solve it and start to solve it and go near the end, it's going to come out clean, giving us whole numbers. Okay? So let's just go ahead and do what we did on the last problem, or the last problems, right? The last questions. We look at the parentheses and we see that our terms, there's nothing we could do inside here. Most likely, when you're taking the test, there will be nothing to do inside the parentheses, but they could trip you up and just throw a curveball and be like, all right, we're going to make them do something in the parentheses. But from what I've seen, nothing in the parentheses for these types of problems, okay? I think the number one thing they want you to get used to doing is to distribute, okay? Distribute, combine, simplify. Let's begin. So I'm going to go line by line because this one I may mess up. I already proved that I could mess up. So question 6, I messed up. So negative 1/3, I'm going to multiply that by 12x squared. And I have an x too, so I'm just going to do a dot. Okay, negative 1/3 times 12x squared. Well, that equals negative 12x squared over 3, and that just equals negative 4x squared. So I'm going to put a negative 4x squared over here, and then I have negative 1/3 times negative 9y, and this one equals positive 9y over 3, because a negative times a negative equals a positive. And this gives me 3y, because 9 divided by 3 is 3. So I'm going to go plus 3y. And lastly, I get negative 1/3, and this is where it gets ugly, times 14z. And this equals negative 14z over 3. And one could be like panicking right now because they see this fraction. But not you, because you practice with Markyfbaby. Okay, so we're going to just write that out like that. Okay, next, let's go ahead and do the second parentheses. And of course, you know, I'm doing it slow right now, but when you're taking the test and you got the scratch paper, you'll be writing this down super duper fast. Okay, we have 2 times 5x squared. That equals 10x squared. Okay, 2 times negative 4y equals negative 8y. And then 2 times 3z equals 6z. Okay, so I'm going to write those down. 10x squared minus 8y plus 6z. All right, that one was easy. We like those. All right. Okay, next one we have 1/3, and that's a positive 1/3, and then times 9x squared, and this equals 9x squared over 3, giving us 3x squared. Okay, right? Yes, 3x squared. And then I get 1/3 times 6y, giving me 6y over 3 equals 2y. Okay, plus 2y. And I just want to rewrite this because that 2 is a little too big. There you go. And then I have 1/3 times 5z, giving me 5z over 3. Now this is where, again, I would, if I didn't practice with Markyfbaby, I would be panicking right now. So I'm going to put 5z. All right, 5z over 3. And that's okay. We come all this way, we're not going to give up. We got one more. And that one I really don't need to write out. Okay? I want you to understand that you could either do that little one trick that I do, which is I like to put the 1 right here and then multiply it out. But you could just get this negative and distribute it, and you just flip the signs for each term. So in this case, this would be negative 12x squared, positive 6y, and then positive 2z. Okay? Now, before we start combining like terms, let's go deal with this fraction. We have negative 14z over 3, and we have positive 5z over 3. The beauty of this, right? The beauty of this fraction are we already have a common denominator. So we don't need to multiply anything. We just add. So what is minus 14z plus 5z? Well, that equals negative 9z over 3, and negative 9 over 3 just equals negative 3z. Okay? So these combined together equals negative 3z. So all I'm going to do is just get one of them, or erase both of them, and then put a minus 3z. Now we can combine everything, okay? Now let's go ahead and deal with the squared terms, the x squared terms. So I have negative 4x squared plus 10x squared plus 3x squared minus 12x squared. Okay, so this is my thought process. I have two positive ones right here. 13x squared, or 10x squared plus 3x squared, that equals 13x squared. Well, if we minus 12x squared, that gives us just x squared. And then negative 4x squared plus x squared, well, just go down the line by one negative, and that gives us negative 3x squared. And we could eliminate b because that's positive. Okay, so I'm just going to cross these out. And now I'm going to deal with the y terms. And I have 3y minus 8y plus 2y plus 6y. Okay, well, what I see here is this equals 8y. And 8y, and then combine that with negative 8y, they cancel out, and that leaves me with 3y. So I'm just going to write this right here like this, negative 3x squared plus 3y. And then I go to my answer choices, and we can eliminate a. So let's go ahead to the last term, which is the z terms. So I'm just going to erase the y's, and now I'm going to go negative 3z plus 6z plus 2z, okay? And then negative 3z plus 6z is positive 3z, and then plus 2z, that equals 5z. And that's a positive number, okay? Plus 5z. So that gives us answer choice D as the correct answer. All right. So those are the correct answers on the slide deck. I do have the answers in my notes. And that concludes
Polynomial expressions.
This is actually part 2. So make sure to check out part 1, and those will just have very similar problems. But again, the more problems that you do, the more reps you get in, the better you get at this skill, which is to simplify polynomial expressions. All right, and you do that by distributing. You do that by watching the fractions. And you do that by doing simple math. And you develop other skills, or you use other skills such as multiplying exponents and multiplying and dividing fractions. All right. Make sure to check out the 20 tips that you need to learn for the test. All right. And right now, I'm going to show you the answer choices, or I'm going to show you the slides with the problems again, as well as step-by-step directions. All right, I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like it if you did. You better like it. It goes out to people just like you for free. All right, for free. I know the iPrep's like $49.99 and the Ultimate Electrician's Guide is $100 or something like that. And some people have told me that it's like $75 to $100 for one practice test. Okay? With no tutor. With me, you get tutor. You get random problems that most likely will be on the test, and you get a YouTube tutor. All right? And you get gaming too, because your boy does gaming.
Make sure to check those videos out too.
So, anyway, that's all I have for you guys. Bye. I like this hat. If you see me in the bay, this is it. I'm wearing a cowboy hat.